Good day, everybody. This is Yin Yang in California with Morsels of a Thought of Wisdom, the Book of Virtues by William J. Bennett. We are here to talk about responsibility today. It is Words and Wisdom Wednesday. I barely got my earrings on, so I don't even know if they are. Okay, so my story today is we're going to read half of it because it is a good long story that we are going to read on responsibility. It's brought into two different sections. It's called The Hiltons' Holiday. Sarah Orne Jewett. So ORNE is the middle name, Jewett, JEWETT. This story is about the most fundamental of parental responsibilities, spending time with children. Here we find two parents doing their best to instruct their daughters in matters of right conduct. We find the teaching through example of civility, politeness, remembrance of old friends, and thoughtfulness for loved ones, hence all the thank you cards that we used to get all the time. And we discover that in the observance of these daily duties, we win happiness. According to Willa Cather, this was Sarah Orne Jewett's 1849 to 1909 favorite story. She lived 60 years exactly. Part 1, Roman numeral 1. I think we may go up to Roman numeral 2. I'm not sure if we'll get past that. But there was a bright full moon in the clear sky, and the sunset was still shining faintly in the west. Dark woods stood all about the old Hilton farmhouse, save down the hill, westward, where lay the shadowy fields which John Hilton and his father before him had cleared and tilled with much toil, the small fields to which they had given the industry and even affection of their honest lives. This is a style that we used to use, we being Americans, used to use in writing before TV, before real TV, before television, before the cathode ray tube and the unit that we used to call the television set in our houses. We used to have radios, and prior to that, we had books. And this is written in the style in which it is flowery language, and we can take the time to indulge in the setting and the specificness of the story. John Hilton was sitting on the doorstep of his house. As he moved his head in and out of the shadows, turning now and then to speak to his wife, who sat just within the doorway, one could see his good face, rough and somewhat unkempt, as if he were indeed a creature of the shady woods and brown earth instead of the noisy town. Kempt means hair is neat. Unkempt means messy-haired. KEMPT, not KEPT. It was late in the long spring evening, and he had just come from the lower field, just as cheerful as a boy, proud of having finished the planting of his potatoes. Now, you can't see potatoes once you've planted them, but if you're proud of it, that means you know you did your work. I had to do my last row mostly by feeling, he said to his wife. I'm proper glad I pushed through and went back and ended off after supper. 'Twould have taken me a good part of tomorrow morning and broke my day. 'Tain't no use for ye to work to yourself all to pieces, John, answered the woman quickly. I declare it does seem harder than ever that we couldn't have kept our boy. He'd been coming 14 years old this fall, most a grown man, and he'd work right alongside of you now the whole time. 'Twas hard to lose him. I do seem to miss little John, said the father sadly. I expect there was reasons why 'twas best. I feel able and smart to work. My father was a girl strong. Oh, sorry. My father was a girt, strong man, Girt. Girt means girdled. and a monstrous worker after me. 'Tain't that, but I was thinking by myself today what a sight of company the boy would have been. You know, small as he was, how I could trust to leave him anywheres with the team, and how he'd beseech to go with me wherever I was going, right always in my tracks. I used to tell him, poor little John, for all he was so young he had a great deal of judgment, he'd have made a likely man. The mother sighed heavily as she sat within the shadow. But then there's the little girls, a sight of help and company, urged the father eagerly, as if it were wrong to dwell upon sorrow and loss. Katy, she's almost as good as a boy, except she ain't very rugged. She's a real little farmer. She's helped me a sight this spring, and you've got Susan Allen. That makes a complete little housekeeper for you, as far as she's learnt. I don't see but we're better off than most folks, each on us having a workmate. That's so, John, acknowledged Mrs. Hilton wistfully, beginning to rock steadily in her straight, splint-bottomed hair. It was always a good sign when she rocked. "Where be the little girls so late?" asked their father. "'Tis getting long past 8 o'clock. I don't know when we've all set up so late, but it's so kind of summer-like and pleasant. Why, where be they gone?" "I have told you, only over to Becker's Fields," answered the mother. "I don't see myself what keeps 'em so late. They beseeched me after supper till I let them go. They're all in a dazzle with the new teacher. She asked 'em to come over. They say she's unusual smart with arithmetic, but she was a kind of gorpin look to me. She going to give Casey some pieces for her doll, but I told Casey she ought to be ashamed, wantin' dolls pieces, because she's getting to be. I don't know she's ought though. She ain't but 9 this summer." "Let her take her comfort," said the kind-hearted man. "Them things draws her to the teacher and makes them acquainted. Katie's shy with new folks, more so in Susan Allen's, who's of the business kind. Katie's shy feeling and wishful." Morsels of a Thought of Wisdom. We are reading a story called The Hiltons' Holiday by Sarah Orne Jewell. Now, I can't memorize that. To get to the front. And this is in the Book of Virtues by William J. Bennett for Words and Wisdom Wednesday, 1622 consecutive mornings. I've come to you to try to make you have a great day. Okay. Let her take her comfort, shy, feeling, and wishful. "I don't know but she is," agreed the mother slowly. "Ain't it sing'lar how well acquainted you be with that one, and I with Susan Ellen? 'Twas always so from the first. I'm doubtful sometimes our Katie ain't one that'll like to get married. Anyways, not about here. She lives right with herself, but Susan Ellen ain't nothing when she's alone. She's always after company. All the boys is waiting on her already. I ain't afraid but she'll take her pick when the time comes. I expect to see Susan Allen well settled. She feels grown up now. But Katie don't care one mite about none of them things. She wants to be roving out of doors. I do believe she'd stand and hark to a bird the whole afternoon, to the whole forenoon. Perhaps she'll grow up to be a teacher," suggested John Hilton. "She takes to her book more'n the other one. I should like one of 'em to be a teacher, same's my mother was. They're good girls, as anybody's got." "So they be," said the mother, with unusual gentleness, and the creak of her rocking chair was heard, regular as the ticking of a clock. The night breeze stirred in the great woods, and the sound of a brook that went falling down the hillside grew louder and louder. Now and then one could hear the plaintive chirp of a bird. The moon glittered with whiteness like a winter moon, and shone upon the low-roofed house until its small window panes gleamed like silver, and one could almost see the colors of a blooming bush of lilac that grew in a sheltered angle by the kitchen door. There was an incessant sound of frogs in the lowlands. "Be you asleep, John?" asked the wife presently. "I don't know but what I was almost," said the tired man, starting a little. "I should laugh as if I was to fall sound asleep right here on the step. 'Tis the bright night, I expect, that makes my eyes feel heavy, and 'tis so peaceful. I was up and dressed a little past 4 and out to work. Well, well." and he laughed sleepily and rubbed his eyes. Where's the little girls? I'd better step along and meet 'em. I wouldn't just yet. They'll get home all right, but 'tis late for 'em certain. I don't want 'em keepin' Miss Becker folks up neither. There, let's wait a few minutes, urged Mrs. Hilton. I'd be thinking all day I'd like to give the child'n some kind of treat, said the father, wide awake now. I hurried up my work 'cause I had it so in mind. They don't have the opportunity some do, and I want 'em to know the world and not stay right here on the farm like a couple of bushes. They're a sight better off they're a sight better off not to be so full of notions in some is, protested the mother suspiciously. Certain, answered the farmer, but they're good, bright child, and they're commencing to take a sight of notice. I want 'em to have all we can give 'em. I want 'em to see how other folks does things. Why, so do I. Here the rocking chair stopped ominously. But so long's they're contented. Contented ain't all in this world. Hopper toads may have that quality and spend all their time a blinkin'. I don't know how as being contented is all there is to look for in a child. Ambition's something to me. Oh, now you've got your mind onto some plot or other. The rocking chair began to move again. Why can't you talk right out? "'Tain't nothing special," answered the good man, a little ruffled. He was never prepared for his wife's mysterious powers of divination. "Well, there you do find things out, the master. I only thought perhaps I'd take 'em tomorrow and go off somewhere if 'twas a good day. I've been promising for a good while I'd take 'em to Topham Corners. They've never been there since they was very small." I believe you want a good time yourself. You ain't never got over being a boy. Mrs. Hilton seemed much amused. There, go if you want to take 'em. They've got their summer hats and new dresses. I don't know and nothing that stands in the way. I should sense it better if there was a circus or anything to go to. Why don't you wait and let the girls pick 'em some strawberries or nice roseberries, and then they could take and sell them to the stores? John Hilton reflected deeply. I should like to get me some good yellow turnip seed to plant late. I ain't more than satisfied with what I've been getting the late years on Ira Speed, and I'm going to provide me with a good hoe. Mine's getting worn out all shackly. I can't seem to fix it good. Them's excuses, observed Mrs. Hilton with friendly tolerance. You just cover up the hole with something. If you get it, I would. Ira Speed's so jealous he'll remember it of you this 20 year. You're going and buying a new hoe, anybody but him. I've always thought 'twas a free country, said John Hilton soberly. I don't want to vex Ira neither. He favors us all he can in trade. 'Tis difficult for him to spare a cent, but he's as honest as daylight. At this moment there was a sudden sound of young voices, and a pair of young figures came out from the shadow of the woods into the moonlighted open space. An old rock An old cock crowed loudly from his perch in the shed, as if he were a herald of royalty. The little girls were hand in hand, and a brisk young dog capered about them as they came. "Want it dark getting home through the woods this time of night?" asked the mother hastily, not without reproach. I don't love I don't love to have you gone so late. Mother and me was timid about you, and you've kept Miss Becker's folks up, I bet, said their father regretfully. I don't want to have it said that my little girls ain't got good manners. The teacher had a party, chirped Susan Ellen, the elder of the two children. Going home from school, she asked the Grover boys and Mary and Sarah Speed, and Miss Becker was real pleasant to us. She passed round some cake and handed us sap sugar on one of her best plates, and we played games and sung some pieces, too. Miss Becker thought we did real well. I can pick out most of a tune on the cabinet organ. Teacher says she'll give me lessons. I want to know, dear, exclaimed John Hilton. Yes, and we played Copenhagen and took sides spelling, and Katie beat everybody spelling. There was there. Katie had not spoken. She was not so strong as her sister, and while Susan Ellen stood a step or two away addressing her eager little audience, Katy had seated herself close to her father on the doorstep. He put his arm around her shoulders and drew her close to his side where she stayed. "Ain't you got nothing to tell, daughter?" he asked, looking down fondly, and Katy gave a pleased little sigh for answer. "Tell 'em it's going to be the last day of school and about our trimming the schoolhouse," she said, and Susan Ellen gave the program in most spirited fashion. "'Twill be a great time," said the mother when she had finished. "I don't see why folks want to go traipsing off to strange places when such things is happening right about them." But the children did not observe her mysterious air. "Come, you must step yourselves right to bed." They all went into the dark, warm house. The bright moon shone steadily all night, and the lilac flowers were taken by no breath of wind until the early dawn. So now we are at part two. This is Morsels of a Thought of Wisdom, number 1622. This is a story on responsibility from William J. Bennett's collection on the Book of Virtues, The Hiltons' Holiday. Sarah Orne, O-R-N-E, Jewett. It's Jewett. Part 2. The Hiltons always waked early. So did their neighbors, the crows and song sparrows and robins, the light-footed foxes and squirrels in the woods. When John Hilton waked before 5 o'clock, an hour later than usual because he had sat up so late, he opened the house door and came out into the yard, crossing the short green turf hurriedly, as if the day were too far spent for any loitering. The magnitude of the plan for taking a whole day of pleasure comforted him seriously, but the weather was fair, and his wife, whose disapproval could not have been set aside, had accepted and even smiled upon the great project. It was inevitable now that he and the children should go to Topham Corners. Mrs. Hilton had the pleasure of waking them and telling the news. In a few minutes they came frisking out to talk over the great plans. The cattle were already fed and their father was milking. The only sign of high festivity was the wagon pulled out into the yard with both seats put in as if it were Sunday. But Mr. Hilton still wore his everyday clothes, and Susan Ellen suffered instantly from disappointment. "Ain't we going, father?" she asked complainingly, but he nodded and smiled at her, even though the cow, impatient to get to pasture, kept whisking her rough tail across his face. He held his head down and spoke cheerfully in spite of this vexation. "Yes, sister, we're going certain and going to have a great time, too." Susan Ellen thought that he seemed like a boy at that delightful moment and felt new sympathy and pleasure at once. "You go and help mother about breakfast and them things. We want to get off quick as we can. You coax mother now, both on ye, and see if she won't go with us." "She said she wouldn't be hired to," responded Susan Ellen. "She says it's going to be hot, and she's laid out to go over and see how her Aunt Tamsin Brooks is this afternoon." The father gave a little sigh, then he took heart again. The truth was that his wife made light of the contemplated pleasure, and much as he usually valued her companionship and approval, he was sure that they should have a better time without her. It was impossible, however, not to feel guilty of disloyalty at the thought. Even though she might be completely unconscious of his best ideals, he only loved her and the ideals the more, and bent his energies to satisfying her indefinite expectations. His wife still kept much of that youthful beauty which Sue Ellen seemed likely to reproduce. An hour later the best wagon was ready, and the great expedition set forth. The little dog sat apart and barked as if it fell entirely upon him to voice the general excitement. Both seats were in the wagon, but the empty place testified to Mrs. Hilton's unyielding disposition. She had wondered why one broad seat would not do, but John Hilton meekly suggested that the wagon looked better with both. The little girls sat on the back seat dressed alike in their Sunday hats of straw with blue ribbons, and their little plaid shawls pinned neatly about their small shoulders. They wore gray thread gloves and sat very straight. Sue Ellen was half a head the taller, but otherwise from behind they looked much alike. As for their father, he was in his Sunday best, a plain black coat and a winter hat of felt, which was heavy and rusty looking for that warm early summer day. He had it in mind to buy a new straw hat at Topham so that this with the turnip seed and the hoe made three important reasons for going. Remember and lay off your shawls when you get there and carry them over your arms, said the mother, clucking like an excited hen to her chickens. They'll do to keep the dust off your new dresses comin' and goin'. And when you eat your dinners, don't get spots on you and don't point at folks as you ride by and stare, or they'll know you come from the country. And John, you call into cousin Adeline Marlowe's and see how they all be, and tell her I expect her over certain to stop a while before hayin'. It always eases her flistic to get up here on the high land. Flistic. Fli- Physic. Phthisisic. Physic. To get up here on the highland. And don't come home all wore out. And John, don't you go and buy me no nickshaws to fetch home. I ain't a child, and you ain't got no money to waste. I expect you'll go like's not and buy you some kind of foolish boy's hat, and do look and see if it's reasonable good straw and won't splinter all off the edge. And you mind, John. Yes, yes, hold on, cried John impatiently, and then he cast a last affectionate, reassuring look at her face, flushed with the hurry and responsibility of starting them off in proper shape. I wish you was going too, he said, smiling. I do so. I do so. Then the old host started, and they went out at the bars and began the careful long descent of the hill. The young dog, tethered to the lilac bush, was frantic with piteous appeals. The little girls piped their eager goodbyes again and again, and their father turned many times to look back to wave his hand. As for their mother, she stood alone and watched them out of sight. There was one place far out on the high road where she could catch a last glimpse of the wagon, and she waited what seemed a very long time until it appeared and then was lost to sight again behind a low hill. They're nothing but a pack of children together, she said aloud, and then felt lonelier than she expected. She even stooped and petted the unresigned little dog as she passed him, going into the house. The occasion was so much more important. The occasion was so much more important. So the occasion was so much more important than anyone had foreseen that both the little girls were speechless. It seemed at first like going to church in new clothes or to a funeral. They hardly knew how to behave at the beginning of a whole day of pleasure. They made grave bows at such persons of their acquaintance as happened to be straying in the road. Once or twice they stopped before a farmhouse while their father talked an inconsiderately long time with someone about the crops and the weather, and even dwelt upon town business and doings of the selectmen, which might be talked of at any time. The explanations that he gave of their excursion seemed quite unnecessary. It was made entirely clear that he had a little business to do at Topham Corners and thought he had better give the little girls a ride. They had been very steady at school, and he had finished planting and could take the day as well as not. Okay, so soon, however, they all felt as if such an excursion were an everyday affair, and Susan Ellen began to ask eager questions, while Katy sat silently apart, enjoying herself as she never had done before. Okay, so they're on their outing. We shall we shall resume this next Wednesday. It is called the Hiltons Holiday. The Hiltons' holiday. Sorry, the Hiltons' holiday. All right. I'll talk to you again later. Okay. Old Kinderhook.